The beginning of a musical composition is a special moment and it has certain requirements. It must create some kind of suspense and give the listener a reason to go on listening. We've all had the experience of listening to a piece that we find boring or uninteresting. Even 10 or 15 minutes can seem like an eternity. Consider this beginning. A long, sustained consonant chord with a diminuendo is not a successful start. The harmony has no tension, and the diminuendo is just fading away. If anything, it sounds like an ending. There's nothing here that creates any suspense or makes us curious about what will come next. Okay, how about this one? This is a bit better, at least the chord is dissonant, but the static nature of the chord, combined with the long diminuendo, still doesn't make us eager to go on. Now listen to this version. This is much better. Even though the chord here is consonant, the little crescendo combined with the interruption by the harp leaves us wondering what comes next. The interruption creates curiosity about the relationship between the two gestures, since the harp chord is not what we would expect after that long D-flat major chord. So in the ensuing music we would expect these two elements to return later in the piece, perhaps with one of them gradually taking precedence over the other, or perhaps it's some kind of confrontation. This is just like a good beginning to a novel. The first chapter will introduce one or more characters and show us that they have some kind of problem or expectations, which the author could then play with and exploit as the story progresses. So the most common fault in an unsuccessful beginning is simply no suspense. There are other problems that sometimes arise, however. Listen to this. This is the improved beginning we just heard, but it's followed by another contrasting idea. The timbre, oboe and pizzicato is also completely new, and the rhythmic motive in the oboe is also completely contrasting, and the tempo is faster also. The problem here is there are too many ideas which seem unrelated to one another, so the listener is curious but quickly gets confused. This is why, even in larger symphonic works, we very rarely hear more than two ideas at the start. If the first two ideas, the staying chord and the harp interruption, had been developed for a while, we could have made a transition to the new oboe idea. But here the contrasts pile up too fast before we've gained any familiarity with the material. Okay, what about this version? This works much better. Why? Well, the opening is repeated in sequence, so we become more familiar with the material. The tempo is also a bit quicker, and now it's the same as the oboe idea. The harp chord is also repeated in sequence. Finally, when the oboe idea gets started, the harp overlaps with its last chord, creating an audible connection with what came before. The sequences here are just a form of repetition, but they add enormously to the music's continuity. In lessons 14, 15, and 16 of this series of videos, we've already talked about repetition and its power in creating successful musical continuity. Just adding a bit of repetition in our example here with these sequences makes the whole much more coherent, instead of just three unrelated ideas, one after the other. One final comment about successful beginnings. There are various interesting examples of major symphonic works like Beethoven's 7th Symphony or Brahms' First, where a very substantial slow introduction precedes a long fast movement. It's an interesting exercise to imagine what these movements would have been like without the introductions. When we do, we quickly come to the realization that although the composer certainly could have started the fast movement right away, the slow introduction is much more impressive and makes the emotional range of the music much richer. The substantial contrast provided the slow introduction is a big part of that richness. If you want to go deeper into this subject, there are many works by Beethoven that show him experimenting with beginnings, always successfully.